Alright, so now we have this question that says solve for x. So we are working with a quadratic inequality. Right, remember there are steps that we have to actually look for or try and work with when we are working with quadratic inequality. So the very first one here, it is to make sure that we move all the terms, right? We are going to move all the terms to one side of the equation, or you can just say that you move all the terms to the left hand side. But then generally speaking, so you just move all the terms to the to one side of the equation, and then just make sure that one side of this inequality it is equals to 0, right? While you are doing that, make sure that you are going to arrange your terms in terms of the descending powers of x, right? And then why is it that we are actually doing that? We want to write this in standard form, right? Remember, standard form it's ax squared plus bx plus c, while the other side of the inequality or the equation it's equals to 0. So now after doing this, after writing this in standard form, you are going to factorize, right? You have to factorize, right? Did I factorize? Because you have a trinomial, you factorize. Or maybe when you have two terms which is a binomial, you can factorize by taking out the common factor, then use a zero product rule, right? So now in this case, after factorizing, you're going to find your critical values, right? Find your critical values, and lastly you use your number line, right, in order to determine your answer. But then remember, your number line, it is not yet your final answer, it's just a graphical representation of your answer, right? So now in this case, we have x squared minus 2x minus 3 that is greater than 0. We have to solve for x. We have a quadratic inequality, so as we are saying, move all the terms to the left hand side, or you simplify, write it in standard form. You can see that this step has already been done for us. The only thing that we have to do now is to factorize this. And now when you factorize this, it's going to be x minus 3, and then it's going to be x plus 1 that is greater than 0. That is us when you factorize that trinomial. And then when you find our critical values, we're just going to pretend as if this inequality sign is an equal sign, so that we use the zero product rule, and then we find the values of x. Now the value of x from the first bracket here, it's actually going to be, so we write critical value. Our first critical value here is going to be 3, and then our second critical value here in this case is going to be -1, right? So those are our critical values. So after finding your critical values, remember, you're going to draw your number line, right? And then what you do here, normally you write these critical values on a number line. This is our x-axis. This case we would have -1 here, then we would have 3 here, right? You write it in terms of smallest one first, then the largest one after. Then remember, you're going to now look at the coefficient of x squared, right? The coefficient of x squared is positive, but what I would like you to do, you're going to check the coefficient of x squared by multiplying this x and this x here. When you multiply this x and this x, you're going to get positive x squared. So remember, when the value of a, when a is greater than 0, or when a is positive, you are going to have a smiley face. So that's what we are actually going to have, right? Remember, when you multiply x and x, this x here and this x here, you're going to get positive x squared. Then it means that you have a smiley face or a concave up, right? So you're going to have this, then that's your graph like that, and then you shade like this. Remember, you go back to the last inequality sign, right? Remember, last inequality sign, when you're moving from below going up, this is our last inequality sign, right? Our last inequality sign, it says greater than 0. Remember, greater than 0 means what? It means positive, right? But then what am I referring to? I'm referring to positive y values, right? Positive y values. Where do you find positive y values? you find them above, right? Above the x-axis, right? So you find them above the x-axis. So according to our graphical representation here of our answer, where do we find above? These are the y values that are going to these are the x values that are going to give us what? Positive y values. Again, which other ones? Again, this x value gives us a positive y value, right? These are the x values that are giving us positive y values. So now when you now finally represent your answers here, this section of the graph here, or the section of the part, or this set of x values here, these are x values that are lesser than -1, right? While this set of x values on that other side, these x values, they are actually greater than what? They are greater than 3. Right, so how do you now finally represent your answer? You can say either say that this is x is lesser than -1, or this is when x is actually greater than 3, right? Or the other ones that use the other notation, you can see that this is x is an element, right? Use of course of real numbers from where? From -infinity to -1. Then you close the bracket. Remember, there's no equal sign again. It means that you are going to use this. Then again, remember, next to an infinity symbol or an infinity sign, you cannot use a square bracket again, right? And then remember, or we use the union, then we open another bracket again, and then we say that this is going to continue from 3, but excluding 3, up until what? Up until positive infinity. So this is how you can actually solve or work with inequalities, and inequalities, particularly quadratic inequalities. So make sure that you can recall these steps here